and welcome to our latest edition of the Good Newspaper. And this time we've got some very interesting stories about how people's lives are completely changed, from somebody who was suicidal, addicted, and knowing Jesus, finding hope in Jesus, changed his life. And I've got several stories of people who found in the pot business how the faith in God has helped them so much. So stick with us. I'm with Mark again today. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Colin. The article I'd like to bring to your attention is right there on the front page. It's a man named Carl. And when you read his story, you think, from the age of 5, the things he went through, the turmoil, the trauma, which eventually led to, him being depressed and eventually suicidal. You read his story of the things he went through, the trauma he had to deal with. You would sympathize with them. You would really think, he depressed and suicidal. That makes sense. And he's continuing along this path with really a very dark place, no hope, till a surprising, unexpected encounter takes place. Carl finds himself just walking past a church that's open, looks inside, sees Jesus hanging on the cross. That led to questions. Eventually, Carl began to go to church. His questions were answered, and Carl placed saving faith in Jesus. The reason I recommend this article and the reason it stood out to me is because I think if you read it, it can answer some questions that perhaps you have also. What does this life, this man who was sacrificed, who was killed 2,000 years ago, have to do with me today? What does Jesus have to do? What influence, what impact does he have in a world that is full of suffering and trouble? Well, you read the story of Carl and you can see the influence, the impact, the real answers that Jesus Christ can bring. A man who lived 2,000 years ago, he has influence today. Carl also wrote a book about his experience. I think you might be interested enough to perhaps get that book also and read more about his trauma and how Jesus transformed him. Back to you, Colin.
Thanks, Marcus. Very interesting story. Yeah. I don't know about you, but what is your purpose for life? What gets you out of bed in the morning? Well, there's a very interesting story here about a R&B singer called Raye, who had a lot of problems in her life. She had addiction. She suffered from anxiety and was sexually assaulted, and it all built up in her, and she felt that her life was not worth living. She'd been brought up as with some Christian faith, but turned against that and tried to live a life without God. But she said in a BBC interview, if I hadn't have found faith again, I might not even be here. I'm really grateful I have this faith. It's honestly pulled me out of a really dark place. And she said she owes her life to her faith. And she's even got a tattoo on her arm, which is based on Psalm 91. That's Psalm is a song in the Bible. And this one talks about whoever dwells in the presence of the Most High, in other words, lives in the presence of the Most High God, knows Jesus and knows his presence. That person is really safe and secure and has a purpose in life. It's a wonderful story. And there's another story just a bit further down. This one's a famous actress, BAFTA winner, Samantha Morton, who talks about how faith has helped her so much too. She had a terrible upbringing and a lot of traumatic childhood. Interestingly, often people who've been through really bad backgrounds sometimes blame God. But Samantha doesn't do that. She says that she always felt God was watching her and looking after her, even through the difficult times. And this different perspective in life helps her so much. And maybe that could do the same for you. It's life doesn't have to be seen as negative and all down to us, how we survive in life, down to our own strength and ability. If we know God's with us, watching over us, even when we go through difficult times, it changes everything and gives us hope and a purpose for living. And leave that with you. Mark, over to you.
That is great. As Colin said, this edition is full of people who have recovered from addictions through their faith in Jesus Christ, the help of Jesus Christ. But, that's not the only place people are. On the very back, I'm not going to tell you who, but there's some very famous boxers whose names you might recognize. Very successful. They're not going through any real issues right now, but they're at a stable place. But even they say in their humility, their success is due to Jesus. And so wherever you are, in a dark place, or you look at the world and you see suffering, or whether you're in a good place and you're very hopeful and confident in the future, perhaps you ought to look at this edition of the Good Newspaper and be reminded that in both camps, Jesus Christ has something to offer for you. Thank you.